Hello and welcome to Birdeye Live, the show dedicated to the digital transformation of local businesses everywhere. I am your host, Justin Meredith, and join me as we learn from industry experts about the how and the why for taking your business online and claiming the most valuable real estate on the internet, that first page of Google. Now, if you're tuning in live, please feel free to say hello in the chat. We'd love to hear where you're tuning in from, and feel free to ask any questions. But we have an amazing lineup of stuff to cover today. First, I'm joined by my co-host, Sirit Singh. Welcome, Sirit. A pleasure to have you back on today. Are you excited for today's topic?
Absolutely, Justin. Thank you for having me. And about AI, I want to say that it's becoming a key player, in how businesses show up in search results today. And in this session, live stream, we aim to break it down into clear and distinct steps, to show businesses how these trends are directly affecting the way they connect with their customers. And for this particular session, whether you're a single or a multi-location business, there's something here for everyone to take back and apply.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that's a great kicking off point. And so for today's episode of Birdeye Live, we are going to be taking a look at some of the highlights from our discussion last week with none other than Mike Blumenthal. Mike joined us for a webinar last week. We talked for over an hour, and he spent the entire hour giving us all kinds of incredible insights and advice on the current state of Google, what people need to be doing to stay relevant, stay ranking higher, some of the more breaking news that's been coming out when it comes to local search and SEO. And then, most importantly, we cover how AI is going to be impacting local search moving forward this year. And we covered some really interesting topics. We covered some interesting tips that Mike gave. And so we're going to cover those here today. But essentially, to kick off the discussion that we had with Mike last week, we started by trying to understand, okay, let's first understand the evolution of Google. Where did we start and how did we get to where we are now? And one of the things that, Mike was telling us is that, yes, the AI boom happened, really kind of after that Chat GPT, came onto scene and kind of exploded. But if you're paying attention, you'll also notice that Google's been implementing a lot of advanced algorithms and types of things to help with their search results well before this Chat GPT explosion. And, one of those things most notably is with their Google images and being able to have that image recognition ability, and you can correctly catalog pictures. If you're a business, so you're, let's say you're a restaurant, you can have pictures of a cheeseburger. So when someone searches best cheeseburger near me, if you have a picture of a cheeseburger, it will know it. It'll know that picture's a cheeseburger. And so it's pretty remarkable to hear that some of the stuff that we've been, seeing is kind of been in the works for a lot longer than a lot of people think. So let's take a look at what Mike had to say about that.
And subsequent to that, they rolled out a number of features, but we started seeing, even as back as far as 2013, we saw one day to the next, Google changed every hotel image in the local search results from an interior shot to an exterior shot. And how did they know that? Well, it was the earliest insights we had into their image AI and their image recognition. 2015, they rolled out Google Images, which demonstrated that they could literally extract social graphs, knowledge graphs, local graphs from images, which ultimately resulted in them being able to change images based on user intent and user queries. So you can see that now. If you search for engagement rings, the local pack will have pictures of engagement rings, but if you search for earrings, it'll have pictures of earrings. So they've used that knowledge to upgrade the results in local search.
Interesting stuff. Sirit, so what is your take on this?
So I think it's fascinating to see how AI has been involving behind the scenes like this. It's so much more than just a search box now, and to see Google's AI carefully pick which images show up based on the kind of experience that a customer is looking for. It's tailored. So if you're a business owner, then this for you means that you need to make sure that your photos on Google Business Profile and your website and the listings, they're not just present, or they don't just exist, but they accurately reflect what makes your brand stand out. So a competitive advantage.
Definitely. Yeah, and I mean, I think, and and Mike was saying in the webinar that this is only going to become more important. Photos are just going to become more crucial, because if you think about it, if you're a customer and you're searching for a local business, whether it's a home services business, whether it's a massage parlor or a restaurant or a dentist, whatever it may be, and you're looking at these Google business profiles, you're going to look at the images. Everybody does, because that's the best way for you as a consumer or customer to know what you can expect. If you are going to a business with a storefront and you're looking at the business profile, you can see the front of the store. So when you pull up, if you're driving up to it, you know what it looks like. Or when you're inside, you can see, okay, this is, a nice establishment. This restaurant is really clean, or it's really nice inside. It gives people, if you're, a good example with restaurants is a lot of things. Like one of the big, use cases for me when it comes to Google Images, when I'm looking for a business, is a restaurant. I don't know maybe how nice it is. Should I be wearing a suit and tie, or can I wear flip-flops and a t-shirt? And so a lot of times I'll go to the restaurant that, maybe my fiance, said, hey, we're going to go here tonight. I'll go to Google Images or the business profile and look at those images and say, okay, how nice is this? Do I need to be dressed up? And that's just one use case. And I think that's going to be something that's very important, especially for customers and these AI models that are able to, see essentially these images. And that's just kind of the one piece. That's just one angle of it. But during the webinar, we talked about all kinds of great things with Mike. And one of the things that he was talking about is the implementation of Gemini into local search, and how that is going to impact not only the way people get their search results, but also the way that people search. And so let's take a look and see what Mike had to say about that.
Actually, Gemini 2.0 is the first version that is good at local, and it does some intriguing things. One of the problems with local search, as we know from Google, is very constrained by geography. If you're standing on a street corner and you say, what's the restaurant near me? It's going to give you a 1/4 mile radius. But if you are standing on a street corner with your wife and you're ready to jump in the car and go 2 hours for a romantic meal, it doesn't give you a very good idea where that romantic meal might be. So one of the big changes in AI is asking questions like that. I'm willing to travel 2 hours. I'm willing to, I'm looking for a funky romantic restaurant for an anniversary celebration. What can you tell me? And those kinds of less brittle questions can now be answered with some semblance, and it will go out and look for what cities are within that range, what restaurants are within that range, which of those restaurants are romantic, which of those have sort of a funky element to them, and will hopefully try to give you an answer.
Sarah, what are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree with Mike here. So we've moved past the era where being physically close was enough. So talking about radius-based search. Now people are telling AI exactly what they want, and Gemini is giving them results to check all of those boxes. So as you mentioned, for the previous video, whether it's a romantic vibe, or the place has a casual or a formal setting, and how willing as a customer we are to travel to this restaurant in this case. So for businesses, this means that they should be optimizing for these to include these extra details as well, to make them stand out more. Just go beyond the location based search.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think this is something that's going to develop more and more, these more nuanced questions. Historically, when we search for, let's stick with like a restaurant, like a romantic restaurant, you would search maybe like best or most romantic restaurants in Dallas, Texas, or, best, date restaurants, whatever it may be. And you're going to have kind of these vague, high level, very basic keyword search queries, right? And now it's a lot more personalized and it's a lot more human-like and a lot more nuanced. And, right now it's with Gemini where you can just type it in, and I know that the voice is getting there too. But it's going to get way, way better, especially whenever these models can start to remember your preferences. So it's like, oh, I know Justin, is allergic to pineapples. And so, whenever we're going to a restaurant, we're not going to find, we're not going to, whatever it may be, but that's how it's going to be. And so you can be much more nuanced, especially with the voice. So you could just say, hey, Gemini, can you help me find, a lawn maintenance, service that can help me keep my lawn looking great for this coming spring. I need them to be able to mow X amount of, square footage of grass and, be able to come once a week, whatever it may be. But you can get more detailed like that. And that's what's incredible. And these models are now able to not just like provide you with that first search result, but they'll do a search, find some results, do another search, and they take those multiple steps, kind of like what Mike was describing in the webinar. It's really, really fascinating, and this isn't just with Gemini, it's also with ChatGPT search or Search GPT, however you call it. And same thing with Perplexity. These things are just getting more, nuance, and it's, you can start asking these specific questions, and you can, most importantly, you can ask a follow-up question, which is something that you couldn't do with just a normal Google search. And so, the way that people are going to be searching is going to change. And it's just important for businesses to understand that and understand how they can put themselves in the best position to succeed. Now, in this conversation, we talked a little bit more about, kind of the evolution of Google and how it started and, kind of where things went and the different events that have happened over the past few years that most directly impact local businesses. So let's take a look at what Mike had to say about that.
The other change we saw is in the Ask Maps About This Place, which they're rolling out to the desktop with a slightly different name, where it's sort of a replacement for Q&A. It's Q&A on Google Business Profiles, where Google would ask users to ask questions and answer questions. This basically looks at all of Google's knowledge graph, reviews, the website, and then third parties to answer questions about a business. And it's appearing in Google Maps at least on the iPhone and on mobile at this moment. But it's basically assembles information to any query about the business in real time from a range of sources, sort of hierarchically arranged from Google data sources to reviews to the website to third-party resources.
It's fascinating. It's interesting to see kind of how this stuff is evolving. So what are your thoughts?
That's definitely quite a shift. What's really interesting is how AI isn't just scanning simply your Google profile anymore. It's looking at your website, your reviews, even third-party mentions. So for businesses, this means that they have to think about the bigger picture and ensure that all the platforms that they're present on, they're telling the same story about the business. Because what AI will do is it'll stitch all of those details together and present it back to the end customer. So you want to ensure that the pieces that are coming together are actually appealing to your customers and potential customers, because sometimes they'll see it even before they walk into your store or your restaurant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, to me, it just going back to what we were talking about last time is these searches and these algorithms are becoming more human-like. And if someone were to ask you, hey, Sarah, can you help me find the most romantic restaurant in North Austin? And, they offer vegan options and it's kind of a nice vibe, like, maybe a little bit nicer and, XYZ. And when these algorithms are looking, you're not just going to look at the first result. You'll look at everything. You'll look at their brand. You'll look at their reputation. You'll look at their reviews and see what people are saying about this. And, it's one of those things that it takes a minute to kind of figure out, but I think it's going to get much more nuanced in that sense. So, moving forward, there's going to be a much bigger need to not just focus on just your Google business profile or just your website. You're going to have to expand, because these algorithms are looking at a much broader range of, your online reputation. Now, we're seeing more social media get involved. I've seen Instagram, posts on the search results, as well as Reddit. And, Reddit's been one of those for the last year or so that's really been prominent in the search results. And so it's going to be important. And, and that raises a question is like, okay, well, what should we be focusing on? What are these ranking factors that are important? What matters to the algorithm? And, what can I do as a business to put myself in the best position to succeed? And so Mike in this webinar gave a really solid breakdown of some of the things that are important, the things that you need to continue to focus on, and kind of his take. So let's take a look at that and see what he said.
Google has 3 elements in their local ranking algorithm: proximity, which you win on; relevance; and prominence, which you are losing on. Relevance is largely drawn from your website, review content, whatever, where your categories at Google, your categories elsewhere. Google doesn't think you're as relevant for that query as the next person, or Google doesn't think you're as prominent for that query as the next person. Prominence being inbound links, website mentions. So you need to build out your relevance and your prominence to extend your reach. I would say one thing, though, that most people are not searching using city names anymore. They're just doing auto repair or auto repair near me, less so, but more so than putting city names. So maybe it's the way you're searching, but if you're including city name, then relevance of your website has to include that city name as well. So either maybe your website isn't well structured, or inbound links aren't well structured. We don't know. So is that a quick enough answer?
Interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff. Sierra, what is your takeaways on this?
I absolutely agree. So, intent-based search, and here's what, a lot of businesses are missing out on. Proximity definitely gets you into the race, but relevance and prominence are what actually win you customers. So, I mean, businesses need content that actually matches what people are searching for, is relevant to their search terms. And, along with strong backlinks and media mentions, they definitely, add more feathers to the cap. But yeah, that all of that shows Google that you're an authority. So if businesses lack that, AI search results could prioritize, competitors who have built more trust signals online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting because it seems like, we talked about this in the webinar with Mike, but the more things change with all these AI algorithms and these different ways that things are being looked at, the more they change, the more they stay the same. Because one of the things that really stuck out to me from Mike's advice during the discussion was the basics, those foundational pieces still matter. And it's your reviews, it's your relevance, it's your proximity, what are those key foundational things that people are looking towards in terms of the helpful content that you put out there, in terms of the reviews that you generate, the responses to your reviews, which aren't necessarily a ranking factor from the algorithm perspective, but it's huge for the conversion factor of someone reading your reviews and deciding whether or not to choose your business. And, it's one of those things where it's like, man, you think that there's supposed to be all these major things, this is great news if you're a business, which is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just have to, make more wheels, essentially, start expanding to these different platforms and understanding like, hey, my business is going to be looked at from a lot of different angles. And, especially on Google, those core foundational pieces for local businesses, especially on your profile, are going to be really important. And so it's one of those things that if you're not doing it right now, which is these core pillars of a local business online reputation of your reviews, your business profile, making sure all that information is completely accurate, your name, address, phone number, all those core foundational pieces, you have to continue to be doing those. And so it's one of those things which is encouraging, because it's like, okay, great. That means I don't have to completely redo my whole strategy. I just have to enhance it. And so I think that's a really, really important thing. And one of, and I think this leads perfectly to our next clip, which is, how do you make sure on the more technical side that your presence is set up correctly? And this is talking more on your structured data, your schema markup, and how do you make sure that it's clean and organized for not just Google, but these AI search algorithms. So let's take a look and see what Mike had to say about that, because it was really interesting. How important is it to make sure that your schema markup and those types of things are well organized?
You're dealing with a lot more information retrieval now than you were 2 years ago. Right? Every AI is wanting to gather this information, and they do best with structured data. So it makes sense that you have clearly, and even if you go to Apple developer docs, you'll find Apple is looking for schema. We know Microsoft yesterday or the day before in Munich at SMX mentioned that schema was informing their AI results. So we know that schema, which isn't a ranking factor, it's largely a clarity factor. It helps these engines see your business more clearly because it's marked up in a structured way that they can then repeatably identify. So schema isn't it. So things like your business address only needs to be on maybe your homepage and your contact page in schema. It doesn't need to be on every page.
Fascinating stuff. And I think a lot of this makes complete sense. And, from the first time AI came out, like with the ChatGPT stuff, one of the key messages that people, especially from these big AI labs, talked about, and it's essentially when it comes to the effectiveness of these models, it all comes down to the quality of the data. So if you have bad data going into the model, it's going to spit out bad data, or it's going to have a bad output. And so similarly, if you have all of this data about your business on the internet, and it's not structured, it's not organized, it's going to be really difficult for these algorithms to scan and process and understand your business and rank you higher. And it's one of those things that is just so important. I think there's also a reason why there's a lot of businesses that struggle with implementing AI into their own processes or their own product offerings or whatever it may be, is because the data isn't structured well and it's not organized, and it has to be. And so one of the things that's really important, especially along these lines, is if you're a multi-location business and you've got a ton of different locations. And so you have all of this information from all these locations all over the internet if you don't have it organized and structured well, it's not going to it's going to be a lot harder to rank higher when these algorithms can't decipher what information is relevant for which location, right? And so it gets a little bit messy there. And so making sure that this stuff is completely cleaned up, organized, there's no incorrect data or anything like that could result in some sort of misinterpretation is super important. Now, one of the things that we've kind of touched on so far, and we talked a lot about this in the discussion, is, these algorithms are starting to look at things a little bit more human-like in a way. And they're looking at not just your keywords in your description or the keywords that you have on your webpage or your website. Now it's looking at your brand and at your reputation, like who you are as a business. And it's looking at it from a much more human perspective. And so it's looking at your social media content. It's looking at things that you post on your website. Is it helpful? Is it, do you have a solid grasp of your brand? And this is something that's super important. And I think it's something, Mike has said that this is something that's actually been looked at, has been important for a long time, but people haven't really paid attention to it or talked about it much until, I think he said like the last 6 months. This side of the ranking process has started to really pick up, some headwind, and people are starting to really talk about it. And it's just like, how do you do that? How do you own your brand, and how do you own that customer relationship, especially if you're not able to rely on Google all the time? During this webinar, we talked about zero-click searches. We talked about the different ways that Google is keeping its users on its own platform. And there's some aspects of these AI overviews that essentially take web traffic away from websites, what we found is generally that's not so much for local businesses, but it's still something to think about, because a lot of times, we've seen that there will be an AI overview for a question or something that could be answered by a local business's page and maybe turn into an opportunity. And so, in this part of the webinar, Mike really just kind of, digs into, why it's important to own the customer relationship and nurture that. So let's take a look in here, see what he had to say, because it was really, really interesting.
In terms of owning your customer relationships, you live in a world where Google is big, Facebook is big, ChatGPT is big, and you're small. And ultimately, you shouldn't have to rent your customers back every time. You need a direct relationship with them, depending on your business type. Some businesses, this works better than others. But if you are in a business where you don't always need new customers, then you need to be tracking with every customer email address and text number and getting their permission to communicate with them, and then establishing regular communications to keep that, again, customer focused communications. I don't want to hear from my healthcare provider that they want to review. I want to hear things that are relevant to my health. So keep that relationship going. And then finally, this brand building. We've talked about that a lot, but we think that it's a vastly underemphasized area, whether it's supporting the Little League or whether it's taking out a big billboard or appearing on local interviews or getting articles in the newspaper. We think brand building is, I think, as probably more important than link building.
Sierra, what do you think about that? I thought this was an interesting take.
Definitely. And I think this is one of the most practical things that businesses can act on as quickly. It's very easy to implement, and this can be implemented very quickly. So having, your own customer list, emails, phone numbers, it just gives you, that power to communicate with your customers directly. And in these cases, you don't even have to worry about the changes that are happening in Google or AI disruptions or social media platforms, so to speak. It's a safety net that sort of builds stronger loyalty over time.
Definitely.
And you can also reach out to customers who are less tech savvy this way.
Yeah.
So
definitely. Yeah. And I think this is extremely crucial. And it's not just about protecting your brand, it's not just about protecting yourself if your Google traffic dips down, but this is about being the best kind of business that you can be, which is one that has solid relationships with its customers and loyal customers. And this is something that Birdeye does really, really well in terms of managing the customer relationship from the very beginning to the very end. And what I mean by that is, within the Birdeye ecosystem, and, as it is parallel to the customer journey, Birdeye allows you to help manage your online reviews, respond to those reviews, manage your online listings, everything that really is involved from, when a customer sees your business for the very first time on the internet. We help you manage and put yourself, or, essentially portray yourself in the best possible light, whether that's through optimizing your business profiles, generating more reviews to get that average star rating up, responding to them so that people see that you are listening and that you care. And then during the customer journey, or at least during the part where let's say they click on your website, and we have tools that allow you to engage with those customers, whether it's with a website chatbot, whether it's through texting, whether it's through email. We have these ways that allow you to keep those touch points going with your customers. And then after they finish the transaction, and now they've become your customer, we have post-transaction tools that allow you to stay in touch with them, develop relationships, send them reminders about their next appointment, or send them reminders like, hey, your oil change, we changed your oil about 6 months ago. You might be due for your next one. Little survey requests too, like, hey, we'd love to hear more from you about your experience and how we can improve. All of these things, or referral requests too, is a big one too, which is what we talked about in the webinar. Being able to leverage your own customers as your biggest advocates and cheerleaders is something that every business needs. Especially, this is huge for if you're a home services business because you don't have a storefront that people can go to. So you really end up relying on the word of mouth referrals a lot. And what's awesome is Birdeye kind of handles that entire journey from beginning to end. And, this is one of the key points that Mike talked about in the webinar. And it's, taking that ownership from just like, okay, if I'm on Google, maybe I can attract some more people, to I'm going to create this ecosystem for my business online that not only drives more customers, but also allows me to keep those customers coming back and hopefully expand my reach through them as well. It's a pretty remarkable tool and platform. And, what's also amazing is there's some incredible things coming up. I mean, I'm excited. I just had a meeting this morning about some of the stuff that we have coming down the pipeline for Birdeye with some of these new AI capabilities, and I am stoked.
Awesome.
But it does look like we're getting near the end of our time, and I don't want to go too long because I want to make sure that people still have time to go check out the actual webinar. So be sure to do that. Go watch the recording on our website. We should have a link in the comments as well. And we'll be back next month with another episode of Birdeye Live. We'll be following up our next webinar. And I hope everybody here has an excellent time. Thank you, Sirit, for jumping on today. I loved our conversation. I feel like we had some incredible insights, and I think Mike was phenomenal.
Thank you, Justin. And I just want to say that we hope these takeaways, make it easier for business owners to navigate local search and AI. So
100%.
looking forward to the webinar.
Definitely. Yeah. And if you have any questions, whether it's about Birdeye or about local search, or how maybe you want to try to brainstorm some strategies on how to improve your online reputation, please feel free to connect with us here on LinkedIn, ask us questions. We can set up a call. We'd love to hear from you. Our goal is to help businesses maximize their online presence, attract more customers, and flourish in this time of AI. And so that's just kind of our main goal, and we're excited to help people do it. And so if you want to do that, just let us know. But until then, we will see you on the next episode of Birdeye Live. Thanks, guys.
Customer expectations are higher than ever. And for local businesses with limited resources, meeting these new demands to stand out from the competition can be a struggle. Meet Birdeye, our very own AI purpose-built to power digital customer experience. With Birdeye, local businesses of any size can deliver personalized experiences, elevate business outcomes, and better understand their customers without adding resources. Birdeye powers all the Birdeye tools your business already uses, enhancing your entire customer experience with personalized, contextualized, and human-controlled AI. And making the most of it only takes a couple of clicks. You can use Birdeye to rewrite your Google business description for SEO. Effortlessly engage your customers with fully personalized AI-generated review replies and messages. Create attention-grabbing social posts, from text to design, in a click of a button to grow your local presence. Even use AI to summarize your reviews, messages, and survey responses to learn how to improve your customer experience. And you can do it all without needing additional team members or spend. Birdeye gives your team the ability to personalize and elevate every customer interaction, from review responses, messaging, social, and beyond, at scale. Respond to every customer review in a way that's relevant, meaningful, and in the language your customers prefer, with auto-translate. Increase conversion over messaging with contextualized responses that demonstrate a deep understanding of your customers' needs. Birdeye even helps you think ahead. It automatically identifies trends and spots areas of improvement based on vast volume